Hey guys, it's a legend. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Real Quarantine Show. You know what? We've got a bit of a bonus for you because not only do we have a brand new episode, we have actually classic episodes. Because before we came to you, we were on another network and we played a bunch of cool shows. Andy, tell the people what you thought of those old shows.
It's all these shows are great. I mean, I always say, our what we do is for the love of the business. We've had great episodes. I've been able to talk with some of the guys from Puerto Rico about Puerto Rico memories. We've talked a lot of history. One of my favorites is talking not once but twice with the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller.
I mean, that's incredible. I would never have thought a year ago, a guy who loves wrestling history, that I would ever have a chance to actually talk and ask questions to the Tennessee stud. That was amazing. Elio, what kind of great memories do you have on this show?
Yeah, there are so many great episodes, and we've had a couple that come to mind. Of course, Continental, the Ron Fuller episodes, both times we had him on, as well as one of my favorites, the Madison Square Garden Glory Days.
Oh yeah, and we've had some great people. We've had D'Lo Brown, Savio Vega. We've had some really fun guys. We've had some great old veterans. We've had some young up and coming stars, and that's what this show is. You're going to see in the future is going to be all about that. We're going to encapsulate history. We're going to talk about topics of today. We're going to talk about the things that you guys want to talk about. And these little background, these classic episodes of ours, we'll go back, revisit some of the things we've done in the last year. And off and on, we'll be going forward with a whole bunch of new things. So we look forward to seeing you all. Welcome back to the Real Quarantine.
Hey, folks. Welcome back to another edition of the Real Quarantine Show. I'm your host, the legend T. James Logan. With me, the lone wolf, Andy Anderson.
Pleasure as always.
And the gentleman, Elio Canella.
Great to be here.
Guys, we have a returning guest. We've had him on many times. For folks new to the show who have been joining now our new format of the Real Quarantine Show, we've had Evan on a couple episodes of the old Quarantine Show. We want to welcome him back. We're talking about Evan Ginsberg. Evan, welcome to today's show.
Thanks so much. Boy, it's good to be with you guys.
Well, you know what, Evan? You have been a really interesting and loud voice of sometimes reason, sometimes insanity about today and yesterday's wrestling. Evan, you know what? If people always say throw out your credentials, but let's face it, this is a guy who was one of the associate producers on the big hit movie The Wrestler featuring Mickey Rourke, and also associate producer for 350 Days of Wrestling, which is an excellent documentary that I've actually seen. I'm not even blowing smoke this time. I've seen it, and what an interesting and fascinating look into the lives of some of the biggest names from the 70s and 80s. And I really did enjoy that a lot. Evan, obviously you've been around wrestling for a while. Let's just give people who may be new to the Real Quarantine Show, tell them a little bit about your experience with wrestling and what brings you to this merry band of people today.
Absolutely. I started as a fan, like so many of us, and eventually I became a sheet editor. And because of that, I ended up in radio on a 50,000 watt New York City station, WBAI FM 99.5. And one thing always leads to another. I love wrestling, as did the host of the show. I was the co-host, and Fred Giabold was an old school AWA fan. And basically he said, Evan, let's bring some wrestlers up. And next thing I know, we're interviewing Eddie Guerrero and Sherry Martel, not always in studio, but many times on the phone as well. And from there, I started booking wrestlers like Johnny Valiant, Jimmy Valiant, Nikolai, Lanny Poffo, etc. And from booking people, that's how I fell into The Wrestler as an associate producer and basically the wrestling guy. And from there, I ended up working on 350 Days. So one thing always leads to another in this industry.
Yeah. And all this tremendous journey all culminates on you being a guest on It's over. It's over, Kevin. It's over, Evan. You've reached the bottom.
He looks like Dr. Evil in the orange shirt there.
Hey, I'm Dr. Evil. I took the shirt from him. Wow, let me any now you know what, Evan? I would you guys and Andy and Elio, you guys be honest, 'cause I know you guys have Evan on Facebook. Would you say Evan is sometimes maybe a little vocal about his distaste of current wrestling at times?
Evan
Andy?
is not shy to express how he feels. He makes no apologies, and I think that's it. I mean, you know what? Do I agree with everything he posts? No. Do I agree with a lot of it? Yes. And it's in today's world that seems to be lost. I mean, we get memes and jokes about it. It's like, well, you know what happens if you don't if you don't agree with somebody on Facebook? Nothing. Just scroll down and keep going. Like, you know, we're supposed to be adults here. I mean, we're allowed to have different opinions, and we can still appear on shows together. We can still have great conversations together. We can still be friends together. So yeah, like it's Evan is maybe, you know what, maybe just because so many people, at least on my feeds of social media, are maybe a little bit more, I don't want to say conservative, but just maybe more reserved in what they say. But you know, Evan speaks his mind, and like it or not. So, and I respect that. So
let me just put in an asterisk. I'm not one of these guys who do there's been no good wrestling since the Warriors.
No.
You know,
No, that's very clear.
That's not me. I just, as somebody who grew up in New York, and I've been in New York my whole life, as you could tell from my Brooklyn accent. You know, I went to WWF, later WWF, you know, for the longest time, and saw some of the greatest wrestling I ever saw in my life. So to see two great wrestlers like Finn Balor and Roman Reigns, you know, basically do something that was circus-like and would insult the intelligence of a smart sixth grader, you know, to me, it's just disappointing, because those guys could have had a tremendous wrestling match as opposed to a circus. And, you know, I don't have any problem saying that. And yeah, at the same time, I watch New Japan Pro Wrestling, AEW, Ring of Honor, you know, etc. So on, even WWE on occasion when they get serious. And I appreciate quality wrestling, but when it's just insulting to your intelligence, you know, I basically zone out, like my brain flattens. I'm like, did those rings just break? And if so, did those ropes just break? And if so, why? What was that about? You know?
It's one thing when you have, you know, you're doing that superplex with like Big Show and Mark Henry, or you know, like Brock Lesnar or something like that. It's like, okay, yeah. But like you said, you got a 180-pound guy on there, and all of a sudden the top rope breaks.
It made no sense to me. And, you know, if you're going to do this supernatural stuff, then, you know, it's just dumbed down beyond recognition. And, you know, when they say Vince's dad would be proud of, you know, the huge financial success this is, I think the guy would roll in his grave 3 times if he saw last night's show. You know, I think he'd be embarrassed by it, you know, honestly.
It's fair enough. And, you know, this reminds me, I was thinking of this. And Elio, I'm going to ask you about this quick question really quick here. Do you remember, I believe it was the WWE, you know, they sometimes put producing credits into movies. They did a horror movie about some people trapped on an elevator, and one by one they were dying. Do you remember this? I think it was called The Devil or something like this, but it was produced by WWE.
That was the WWE Studios.
Yeah, it was one of their first movies.
That actually sounds familiar.
I don't know
that.
I saw the movie. I know what you're talking about. I didn't know that was WWE.
Well, after all his posts, I want to see that movie redone with Evan and Vince McMahon and a few WWE creative guys in the elevator, and I wonder who's going to make it to the end.
Yeah,
That's
you have to decide which one's which one's
which
actually
one's
the
real
devil.
Is it Evan or is it Vince? It's a tough one.
You guys ever read Jean-Paul Sartre's No Exit?
No, I have not.
No Exit is a classic where these people are locked in a room for eternity. They're in hell and they hate each other. So my idea of hell would be locked in a room with Vince and create forced to watch Raw for eternity. That would be my nightmare of hell.
Well, you know what? Evan has always been a really good source talking about wrestling from the 70s, 80s, but he did make a very interesting point here. And it is true. I've never seen him ever just out and out complain about wrestling today. He does highlight and talk about good wrestling when he does see it today. And I thought today we'd switch gears from our usual dig down memory lane and talk about some of the wrestlers of today that each of us like and why, what particular reason why. And then let's talk about if we think they would make it in the past, and ask Evan if he thinks that those kind of wrestlers in the same situation, the same way they are today, built, booked, presented, would they have been able to survive the MSG days, the glory days of MSG? And so, first of all, I'm going to throw it out to Evan, first of all, to give me a wrestler right now, someone you really enjoy watching at this moment who's a current wrestler, and why do you like this guy?
I think a guy like Okada would have made it in any era because he's great, he's charismatic, he's colorful, he's got all the tools. I mean, whether he would have been a main event guy in WWF, which is super heavyweights, that's a different story, and it's just theoretical anyway. But I think a guy like Okada would have, at bare minimum, worked all the territories and been a star and wrestled around the world. And some guys are just great, and they would make it at any period.
Do you think the fact that Okada is Japanese would have held him back in the MSG days? It was kind of a different time. A lot of times people who weren't traditionally white or black were treated as villains, as the foreign menace.
Well, maybe he would have been with Fuji, Tanaka, Saito,
throwing salt everywhere.
Done the stereotype. But I think he would have made it. I think he would have been a star. I mean, Muda was big in the NWA in the mid to late. I'd seen Billy, and he made it as a star. So great is great. So
even Tiger Mask in the early '80s had the great American run. So okay, that's a good pick, Okada. One of the probably recognized as one of the best wrestlers in the world today. Okay, let's throw it over to you, Andy. Throw me a wrestler who's really on your radar these days.
I'm debating because I don't know if I want to go right to the top for who I'd pick. But I'm gonna maybe, I don't know if it'd be a sleeper or not, but you know what? I think Sheamus has been one of the most consistent guys over the but seriously, over through the pandemic, he's whatever role you've had to put him in, he's done it. I mean, has everything been awesome, kosher? Maybe not. Has there been some silly stuff? Absolutely. But I think just based on his size, based on his look, his ability to go, I think he's a guy that I don't know, and this is where I'm kind of looking to see what Evan's thought on this. I don't know if he'd be necessarily a main event guy or a world champ. Maybe he'd be a contender for Bruno or Backlund or somebody. I don't know about being like a world champ, but to me, the credibility, the believability for me with him is there more so than a lot of other guys in today's, at least in the WWE scene.
It's funny you said that, okay? Because when you said Sheamus, and my first thought was no, yes, no, because I first started thinking back of guys like Bruno, these big, tough, burly, strong guys. Sheamus, let's face it, he's legitimately tough.
Yeah,
he's a guy who will stand there really toe to toe. He's not. He can fight stiff. He can be up there scrapping it out with a young Stan Hansen, definitely. The only thing I'm wondering about, and I'll ask Evan too and Elio, is for me, I like Sheamus a lot, but I feel he's just missing a tiny bit of charisma that like guys like Bruno had. The sort of thing that captured you. And I'm not saying he's nothing. I'm just saying. You know how Stan Hansen was the big, mean, tough guy, but he did lack a tiny bit of charisma versus somebody like Bruno. I see him in that thing as a big, tough guy with just lacking a tiny bit of charisma. I think he would have been a great brawler in that time period. But Evan, what do you think?
I like Sheamus. Every time you see him, he puts on a good or very good match. I wouldn't say he's Terry Funk, but he he always gives 110%, and quality wrestler. And the interesting part is, we were talking before the show, Vince's dad back in the WWF days, it was always about size, because Bruno could bench press 500 pounds or whatnot, 500 plus, and he was actually called the Italian Superman. So every guy that got in the ring with him, I shouldn't say every, but 95% of them were these huge monsters. And Sheamus is a big boy. He's a big
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
And, whether or not he would have gotten 3 matches at the Garden like some of Bruno's legendary opponents is a different question, but he definitely could have been a contender and gotten title shots. And he's legit. He's a good wrestler. He's not the most charismatic guy in the world, but he's back in the old days, you would say he's a solid pro. He could do what needs to be done. Yeah.
But could that be though? Okay, so I mean, especially because of the different time and the way they were utilized, if you threw Sheamus in with like a Grand Wizard or a Captain Lou Albano or something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he has an interesting gimmick, and he hasn't been to the beach in 20 years, and he has a unique look, and I could see it. I could see it, and I would tell you if I didn't.
Yep.
Okay. What do you think, Elio? Elio, do you see Sheamus as a superstar upper echelon guy back in the day? Like, I mean, he's not quite an upper echelon guy here. He's almost there.
Yeah, I can see him as an upper level guy. Because he's got that look, like we all said. He's lacking that charisma. Because everything he doesn't really. He has the right look. The height,
Okay.
The charisma isn't there.
You know, it's really funny, guys. I remember back in the day when Sheamus was first getting his first big push. I think it might have been back on SmackDown. And they used to do these things on Sportsnet where they'd have like a wrestler on before or after, and they would be sitting there talking with the sportscasters and just jawing away, being normal. And he comes out and he's wearing a suit and he's got his hair gelled up and all this stuff. And they're talking, and finally, one of the sportscasters says, I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude. You have got like the whitest skin in the world. Like, he started saying that, right? And he said, he goes, I am under orders that I'm never allowed to tan or really go out into the sun. That's part of my thing. They tell me I can't do that. They want me to look as white as
pasty. Yeah. Like a walking jug of milk.
Yeah. And it's weird here seeing this humongous big man being told you can't go outside in the sun. Sort of absurd, if you ask me. Elio, you got a guy for us?
This one, I become a fan of Damian Priest.
Damian Priest. There's an interesting pick. What are you liking about him? And
I just like the whole presentation, just like all the. Lately, since he won the United States Championship, all the fans are behind him. He's just got the presentation, the look, the charisma,
okay,
the in-ring skills.
all right. Andy, Damian Priest. What are you thinking on this guy? Are you seeing it? Not seeing it?
It's, to me, I don't know, like the. I'm just trying to see, like, I'm trying to think of how I would see his character fit in to like a mid 70s, early 80s type of environment.
Well, first of all, though, what do you see him today? Do you see him today as an upper echelon guy, or is he just kind of the flavor of the month, or is he a guy who's going to be, an upper mid carder for a while? What are you seeing on this guy?
Right now, I don't see upper echelon. I see definite like mid to upper card. I mean, it's kind of the, we talk about they talk about like the proverbial glass ceiling. So there's everybody kind of like, I don't know if I kind of see him at the top of the bottom or the bottom of the top, if you get what I mean. He's to me, he's still that mid ground. He, at least in the main roster, he hasn't been around long enough.
Mhm.
For me, it's still going to take more time. Like, and I'm a guy like way back in the day when Miz debuted, I
Mhm.
was not a fan of the Miz at all. I didn't, I just didn't see anything. And he won over the years. He won me over, like with his work ethic, everything he's put in, everything he's done. So, like that's why I'm not going to straight dismiss Damian Priest and go, nope,
Mhm.
that's where he is this year, because the potential's there. I just
Mhm.
at this point, it's too early for me to say, yeah, I see him being the next Roman Reigns, or
Mhm.
I don't see him being a top guy at this moment.
And you were touching on the fact that it might be a hard fit for the 70s or 80s, because it's nothing. What he is isn't really exactly like anything that was back then.
Well, and I mean, and obviously I wasn't there, so Evan will know a lot more than I would. But I mean, the flashiness to me, it's like I'm
Mhm.
thinking like superstar Billy Graham and some of the tie dye and some of the fancy stuff like that. And to me, I don't, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Anything that would be much more outlandish, unless you're talking like an exotic Adrian Street, or if Dusty Rhodes was getting a little funky. I can't think of anything like similar. Like, okay, well, if we how would Damian Priest
Stand out.
fit? Yeah, fit there. Like, to me, like, we're talking making the picks. It's like, okay, when I said Sheamus, I guess with some maybe minor alterations, I could see Sheamus sliding from here, jumping into the time machine,
Mhm.
and then going into like mid late 70s and being able to kind of just walk down the aisle.
Mhm.
I don't see or feel that with Damian Priest. I mean, maybe if we're tweaking
Okay.
him, I mean, if we're getting creative and we're going to say, okay, well, he's going to be this character, he's going to do this, we can do that with anybody. But in this current state, I don't know.
Okay, but before I hit over to Evan, I got to say, when the first time I seen Damian Priest, it was in Ring of Honor, and I was like, wow, he's really tall. He's big. He does a lot of interesting moves. But the one thing I couldn't shake, and it's maybe unfair of me to say, is he looks old. He looks like an older man wrestling, like an older man who just started. And it made me think of like DDP, where you get a guy who has a very late start. Sure, maybe he has a couple good years, but he's already a very old guy, and he doesn't have a long shelf life on him. And I know that a lot of people have been talking in the WWE about this, that they want to try and get as much out of him now, because he is not a young man. He has been around quite a long time before getting anywhere. And I do not, honestly, I can't picture him in the 60s or 70s or 80s. I don't know where you'd go, what direction with that. His size is different because his body isn't built like the giants of that era.
Yeah.
And he's definitely not the lineage or background like guys who are the hometown ethnic heroes. He doesn't really fall into that at all.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw this over to Evan. Evan, first of all, currently what you're thinking of Damian Priest, and then a little bit of could he do the way back time machine gimmick?
I have to say this real quick before you speak. This almost feels to me like it's like Evan's the almighty judge, and it's like we're sort of like presenting. It's like, please, sir, what do you think of this offering?
well, I'm thinking of, I want his opinion of.
Oh no, I agree. I love it. But just as we're discussing, it's like now we look to here I'll use a modern reference. We look to our tribal chief, the almighty Evan Gibbs.
Hey, at least you didn't say the ancient one. At least you didn't say that's the ancient one.
I'm the ancient elder.
Yes.
Well, I happen to like Damian Priest. I think he's charismatic, and he's got these great moves, and he's got a good look. The issue would have been back in the day, and you guys mentioned it, with the ethnic heroes, it was almost an unwritten quota system. So, for example, if Pedro was on top, and let's say Victor Rivera was the number 2 Hispanic hero, there probably wouldn't have been room for a number 3. Just like you had Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson, and then S.D. Jones like 10 notches below. there wasn't room for a number 4 because
Mhm.
they just had that kind of like this quota system in their heads. And, what's interesting to me is the wrestling fans never really saw color. They
Mhm.
loved the faces. They hated the heels back then. They didn't care black, white, green, orange, Hispanic. They didn't care. But I'm just telling you that the promoters cared. And
Yeah.
whether, Pedro was the world champion, then the Intercontinental champion, back when that title really meant something. So to have another guy, so later Tito Santana came, and he was more like the perennial tag champ. Later, much later, the Intercontinental champ. So I'm just saying, I don't know if they would have made room for Damian Priest, unfortunately, but he's got all the skills, and
Mhm.
I respect the guy.
All right. My pick, I'm just going to jump the shark and I'm going to go for Kenny Omega.
Ooh.
Here's a guy who, oh boy, I watched a lot going into New Japan. I watched his whole beginning as the cleaner before he joined the Bullet Club. Then as he joined the Bullet Club, then he has ascended to the best bout machine that they called him. I mean, he was putting on these incredible matches where you'd sit there and literally watch him for 55 minutes fight Okada, and it was exciting. And it was an incredible time to watch this guy do these things. And when he came over to AEW, we had that first year where it was just like we were all holding our breath, waiting for him to do something, and nothing happened. He just sort of waiting and waiting. Nothing happened. And we started all harking towards, oh, remember the Kenny Omega of old, the one who used to be New Japan, did all this, did all that. Then in the second year, it's like I don't know, a switch gets flipped and he turns into such an over caricature. But then I started watching, and is he really? I mean, we got the Kenny Omega from Japan, at least the stylistics and the actions and the characteristics. But I don't know how well that really plays with a North American audience, because now he comes across as extremely silly, goofy, out of place with a lot of things. Still a great wrestler. You mean you put him on a pay-per-view and he's going to give you a match that's like, wow. But all the stuff in between makes me question, what exactly did I like about this guy in the beginning? And then when I try to say, well, could you put him, like, let's face it, here's a guy who's been considered one of the best wrestlers for the last couple of years. I don't think the 70s or 80s is a place for him. I don't think they would think he was big enough. I think they would think he's too, in an era where secrets were kept, he's too smarmy. He's too quick to try and act like he's letting you in on the joke when nobody was let in on the joke. So for me, Kenny Omega is a guy who I enjoy wrestling. I don't enjoy his promos anymore. I don't enjoy a lot of the silliness and stuff that he's doing right now. It makes me kind of roll my eyes at times. There's those times, Evan, where I talk about, where me and Andy talk about this, where you put on the TV and there's a great wrestling match and you invite your friend over and you sit there and you guys watch it and your friend looks at you and goes, okay, I'm not a wrestling fan, but I kind of get what you like here. But then there's those moments where something comes on and you look and you're like, oh shit, I wish you weren't sitting here, because how in the hell am I going to explain this crap to you? That's sometimes how I feel what Kenny Omega does a lot when he's not wrestling. All the stuff with Don Callis and those little goofy tag team guys is just it's just silly schlock crap that's just WWE light, which I already don't like their version of that crap. So why do I want to see an even more watered down, sillier version of that garbage? So that's my problem and my love and hate for Kenny Omega. Andy, you want to weigh in a bit on Kenny Omega?
There's a lot of interesting stuff that you said there, and I'm trying to, in the moment, trying to kind of pick up, like, okay, well, I kind of agree with this. I don't agree with this. I mean, in today's world, he is what it is. You listed off all the accolades. I don't watch I didn't watch as much of like Ring of Honor and New Japan and whatnot as you guys do or did. So for me, most of my Kenny Omega experience is what I see in AEW.
Okay.
Having said that, and we've had this discussion on shows in the past, the level of goofiness, maybe, I'm not the target demographic. It just doesn't, there's some stuff that I can kind of chuckle with. Other stuff doesn't really resonate with me. As far as sliding him, I just, what we need to do if we do another episode of this, we need to have like Evan's got to have like some sort of like, even if it's just like a backdrop of like a time machine in the background. So it's like, okay, we're gonna send Kenny Omega into Evan's time machine.
No, he has to dress like Doc Brown.
And it's like the MSG time machine or something.
Yeah, a DeLorean in the background.
Yeah, and it's somewhere it's located in Penn Station. So we just pop right up and off we go. Kenny Omega, like, to me, if we're gonna try and slide him into the 70s and the 80s, or like the 70s, early 80s, the size thing is a definite strike against him. You know what, I would almost, like, to me it's like, okay, well, if we're throwing him in there, it's something where like a specialty match where, like the Tiger Mask or the Dynamite Kid, you kind of throw him in there for something that's going to be totally like a total 180 from what you would normally see at the show. It would be that special attraction. Yeah, special attraction that would be there. I wouldn't see him competing for any titles. Just special attraction. That's where I see him.
Him and Andre. No, just
But
Elio.
you know what? But if he was doing a tag match with him and Andre, that'd be something where the finish would be Andre standing in the corner, and then Kenny would be getting on top of Andre's shoulders, and then doing like the splash, and there'd be that 1, 2, 3. Like that would be like that kind of thing. If he was working with Andre.
Or blow us away, and Andre gets on top of Kenny Omega's shoulders. And anyways, Elio, Kenny Omega, buddy.
Hey, yeah, he's had some great matches both in New Japan, AEW, but we're all waiting for him during the first year of AEW to see the old Kenny Omega, and now that we've seen him, while he has his matches, the promos, I just don't like his promos.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Evan.
I just want to mention that Elio looks like he's broadcasting from inside a coffin. It does. It's a light.
He looks like a terrorist, and he's going to demand money that he'll blow up some station if we don't like pay or something. Turn on a light, Elio. It's getting scary.
I honestly feel, and this is high praise because I'm jaded, I think Okada against Omega was the Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe of this era.
Kind of modern day. Yeah.
I agree, Evan.
I think the guy is absolutely tremendous, and going back to, let's say, the mid-70s, early 80s, Vince McMahon Sr. respected guys who could work. I mean, guys like Johnny Rodz and Davey O'Hannon and all the Eddie Gilbert, all these undercard guys could work, Would he have been on top being a smaller guy with no, set gimmick? Like Johnny Valiant used to say to me, back in those days, guy would walk down the aisle and in 10 seconds you'd go, he's the bad cowboy, this guy's the good Indian, this guy's the bad cowboy, this guy's the bad Indian. Kenny Omega looks like some guy walking down the street. I don't think So that's a long-winded way of saying a guy that great would have always had a job. Whether or not he would have been on top in 1975 is a different question. He would have been big in like Florida, even the AWA, where it was always an emphasis on wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In a super heavyweight territory like WWF, he might not have fared as well.
All right. Well, the pendulum has swung back to you, Evan. It's your pick.
Well, so guys who are active right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I love the Lucha Brothers. Either of those guys, just
Okay. Why?
They're just dynamic. They could wrestle, they could fly, they could brawl, they could do it all, those guys. And either one of those guys, I could see being a star.
Mhm.
You know, again with an asterisk, because for Phoenix the size just isn't there.
Yeah, he is small.
How tall is he?
Like
know?
I think he's like 5'9".
Okay.
He is for a wrestler. He's rather small and he's very thin.
Yeah.
Obviously, too, I think they would translate. They would. So let's face it, the 70s and 80s, there were tons of masked wrestlers, and the fact they were Mexican masked wrestlers, boom, you got a built-in gimmick right there. They could be an attraction anywhere.
I think they would have been like Gordman and Goliath and headlined all the territories, and even as singles been showcased just because of how great they are. Gordman and Goliath would come into the Garden, and I saw Gordman wrestle Pedro Morales, and legit long-standing tag team that's great. I think that would have easily translated in that era, but again, you wouldn't see Bruno versus Phoenix.
Yeah. I think Phoenix comes up to his knees. That probably would not work.
Bruno wasn't tall. Bruno was just like a house, built like a house.
No, but I mean, still 5'9". He's a pretty small dude. That little. What do you think of I forgot the Lucha Brothers. Andy.
I am a fan of the Lucha Brothers. I think even there's at one point when we were doing regular reviews of the Dynamite show. Wasn't that one of the first times I think they worked each other? And I think I said that was like my favorite match of the year.
Yes.
To that point or something. I enjoy them now. For me, I'm not looking at it as a Bruno versus Phoenix or Bruno versus Penta, but even despite the size, because of the masks, because of the heritage, just having them as heels, I don't see why they couldn't be like WWF tag team champions.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they'd be able to fit in. And like I said, just, the whole, the Latin thing right there, you have it. And going even into territories, I'm sure they could even be, they'd probably be loved like around like Texas and New Mexico. I mean, you could easily just as, quick turn the switch on them and have them be heels as well. Like it could work either way. So, I think to me, they would have a much better chance of success than say like a Kenny Omega in 70s. Yeah. In the 70s wrestling world.
Mil Mascaris was a headliner in New York.
Yeah.
Pentagon's bigger than his brother. I think he could have been a star solo, but again, I don't see him as a heel challenger to Bruno and back.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe depending on who it was. Sorry, real quick, Evan. Depending on who it would be at the time, maybe as a challenger for the Intercontinental title.
Sure. I mean, he's a legit guy. I mean,
yeah.
Okay. How about Elio? What do you think of?
I like the Lucha Brothers. I've been a fan of the Lucha Brothers since Impact Wrestling. They've had a lot of great matches, both against other teams and as well as against each other. Like that one they had on AEW that we just brought up. Especially that match they just had at the last pay-per-view.
Okay. Yeah, they had
that match. I really enjoyed that one.
I'll tell you guys a funny story. I saw Pentagon versus Phoenix on an indie in New York in front of a mostly Hispanic audience. The match was so great, they were throwing money in the ring at the end. They were throwing bills into the ring, and the whole ring was covered in money. The only time I had ever seen that before was at an Afro pop concert with an African audience. It's a cultural thing. The ring was covered in cash. That's how great that match was.
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
And fans, that is this thing that still occurs in Mexico. It's the ultimate praise you can give a match is to throw money into the competitors. Now, the Lucha Brothers I find a very interesting thing. As a tag team, I think they're tremendous. And it seems like as the years go on, they get better and better and more attuned to each other. Phoenix, I mean, you try and take them apart and it's tough because Phoenix, when you watch, is the guy he's the human highlight reel in that team, Yep. He does all the crazy stuff. But when you do look at him as a single person, he's a very small individual. And he doesn't look like realistically on his own he could do much to a big size wrestler. So that credibility is really hard for him. When it comes, and this I may be having an unfair opinion here, or you guys might not like this, but I struggle with Pentagon because I came in not seeing Pentagon's runs from Impact. I'd heard about it, but not seen any of it. So I think I came in, and I've seen Pentagon a lot, where he came in and he was maybe injured, because it seemed a lot of times in the beginning with the Lucha Brothers, he really didn't do a lot. He did a lot of theatrics, you know. It annoyed me every match. He took off his glove and threw it in your face and that kind of crap. But he didn't actually wrestle much. It seemed like Phoenix did all the wrestling. He did some setups, and that was kind of it. The last little while, it seems like maybe he's feeling a lot better, because it seems like he's doing a lot more in the ring, and he is a bigger guy. I could see him running as a singles guy this day. Could I see him running as a single star in the 80s? No. Mil Mascaras was brought in as a special attraction because he had a name and they knew who he was, and they brought him in, and he was treated as such. I don't think Mil Mascaras would have been done dick if he was just a guy who came in on his own, wrestled the way he wrestled, and just tried to be Mil Mascaras on the level at that time. I think he would have gone nowhere because he was small, and I'm not sure what Mexico got, but it didn't seem we got that much out of Mil Mascaras when he was in the U.S. I never could understand why what he was matching up to. You know? Sorry?
You couldn't understand the appeal?
Yeah, and I want to. That's the thing, is I like international stars, but I think by the time he came up to the U.S., he was already getting into the twilight of his career, and he was sort of living off his name and the fumes of what he was. So for me, a young guy watching him, I was just like, I don't get what this guy's doing. Why are people cheering this guy? He's not that great. He's okay.
I saw him 10 years earlier, and he was great in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So
Tell me.
I saw him headline the Garden against Billy Graham, and he came in and he basically wrestled everybody, and they treated him like Andre. He didn't lose. 99 out of 100 times, Mascaras was he was a big star back then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you think, Evan, when he came in, right? Wasn't he already an established name internationally that they brought in to fight the American wrestlers?
Huge in Mexico, huge in LA, Texas. He appealed to a Hispanic audience, and New York has a huge Hispanic population. So he was a big star here in New York in the 70s.
I guess what the question I'm asking, though, is if he didn't have that international reputation, if he'd just been a young guy starting out with the same gimmick and everyone knowing he was Mexican, do you think he would have gotten anywhere if he was just Mil Mascaras, the guy wrestling in the 70s who was trying to make a name for himself in the US, if he didn't have that international flair behind him to come up behind? Do you think he would have gotten anywhere on that merit? That's the question I wonder.
I think he was great in the 70s. I saw him in LA all the time on TV. I saw him in New York, and he was a wrestler. He was the polar opposite of what Reigns and Balor did yesterday. It was hold for hold, move for move, high spots tossed in. The 1975 Mil Mascaras was not the 1990 Mil Mascaras, like a lot of guys, they slowed down, and
no, that's fair.
but I always thought the guy was the only thing with him was, like Andre, you just go, oh, he's going to win, so there wasn't a lot of suspense.
Okay.
So
all right.
That was something that was missing in his matches, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, I almost feel like, Andy, that I should throw a tag team at you. Since Evan threw a tag team out. Do you think you could scrape out a tag team out of the thoughts of today?
There's not really a lot of.
You can switch over to a singles if you want.
Well,
you were going to say Young Bucks, weren't you?
No, not a chance. Yeah, I would defer my choice right now if you wanted me to do a tag team, just because for what I see and for what I watch, I mean, like my viewing is limited, and we
Yeah.
know WWE's emphasis on tag teams, and I don't.
You're gonna pick Miro and Kip. I know it's okay. Pick singles.
Well, and I don't know if I'm going to be cocky on this one, but I'm trying to think like who is my favorite today, and
Yep.
although he's more like a semi-regular competitor, you
Yep.
guys know like I love Brock Lesnar. I love what he brings to the table. I
Yep.
love how in past episodes we've talked about, like, to me, we in a world where the curtain is ripped right open, he's managed to keep that aura there because he's not on Instagram posting, he's not on Facebook, he's not talking stuff. He's a very private individual, and it's to me the closest as to what we have for kayfabe as we did say back in the 70s. And I mean, he's like the legit beast now, and
Mhm.
I think that he would very easily translate. I don't know, like, would he be a monster heel? Like, I don't know, could you have a heel champion dominate, let's say, like the way Bruno did back in the 70s, Evan?
The only guy that did it was Billy Graham for 10 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
that's
10 months.
The pattern was always the face and versus the monster heel. That was Vince McMahon Senior's thing.
right. So I don't know, like, I mean, to me it's like, yeah, like Brock would have no issue fitting in there, but it's like, well, how do you book Brock Lesnar in the mid 70s?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what they would have done. Lesnar would have come in as like Superman, and he would have wrestled Bruno 3 straight sellouts at the Garden, with the third match in the cage. Then he would have lost, and he would have worked his way down the ladder, went to another territory. 2 years later, come back. That was the pattern.
That was it. Yeah.
He would have been a star, but he probably would not have. We had a guy, Crusher Verdun, big burly guy, and he was not the wrestler that Lesnar is. Lesnar's a legit guy. He's an MMA.
Yeah.
He could kill it with his bare hands. So yeah, him and Bruno would have been a draw. Him and Pedro, him and Backlund, because the guy's legit. So yeah, I would say 3 and gone. And,
Ugh, what a waste.
yeah. And the
Yeah,
next month he'd be wrestling for the Intercontinental belt, and then work his way down the card and out the door. That's the way they did it.
Man, yeah.
No, I'm holding out for Brock Lesnar versus that guy, Baron Sculius.
The cleanup.
Yeah, there we go. Or Chief J Strongbow versus.
Strongbow would have pinned them in '74. That's what
And he would have had a heart attack in the ring in 84 and 82. All right. What do you? I guess. Well, Elio, we know you. What are you thinking of Brock Lesnar?
It's Brock Lesnar. Like he's a beast. Like Andy said, like he keeps himself. He's not on social media. He's a private person. He definitely dominated the 70s.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because you hear like all the tough guys of the 70s of how these rough and tough individuals, and I could just in my mind see one of them going up and trying to say something to Brock Lesnar, and Lesnar just laying him out, punching out Stan Hansen or something, like, oh, okay, we'll leave this guy alone.
The other side of it is the NWA would put the best wrestler as the world champion. That's why you had guys like Jack Briscoe and Holly.
Yeah.
So they might have said, hey, let's make this guy the world champion.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to mess with this guy. So,
Yeah.
so that I could see more than the WWF.
Okay.
Well, here's a weird.
Gagne loved wrestlers. And
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, Brock's a Minnesota boy anyways, right? So
yeah, I could see that.
yeah.
And here's the funny part.
Sorry,
I wonder-
Greg. Sorry, Greg. You're not going to be Ciampa. We're going to have Brock. Just
Yeah, Greg, go back to the bank. He just seems like he'd be a bank manager or something.
Greg Gagne was not a bad wrestler. He
no.
just took a lot of heat as the boss's son. He wasn't bad.
No, but anybody also that's the size though, right? I mean,
It's sort of funny too, because when you guys were talking about that, and I was trying to imagine Brock Lesnar is NWA champion at that time, right? And it's so funny because it's the exact opposite. Is today Brock works so well because he's so realistic, right? And the 70s, you had realism, but you also had this underbelly of a sensationalism you tried to push in with wrestlers. Superstar Billy Graham was this great big muscle guy, but he also had to do the outrageousness and the tie-dye and the blah, blah, blah. And it almost makes me think, poor Brock, how would he survive in the 70s? Because he doesn't really have a gimmick. And you kind of needed somewhat of a gimmick, even though you were a tough, great wrestler. You still kind of needed a gimmick in some ways. I mean, maybe Jack Briscoe not so much, but even Harley Race had kind of the tough guy thing going on. I don't know. I can't say either way if it would work or not, but I wonder.
Dory Funk Jr. basically walked in the ring as himself. He was a wrestling machine.
Yeah.
And even Harley Race, the only gimmick was he was a legit tough guy, but he came in as I'm the best wrestler in the world. So I could have seen Lesnar in that role as a champ for a year or two. Yeah, no doubt.
I'm cool with it. I'm just like I'm saying myself, I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah, I see, but I mean, and maybe for me it's because I wasn't really thinking NWA. I just think more like WWF and then maybe territories. But like, the more we talk about, if Brock, put him in the NWA, to me it's like that sounds so much better because like you said, 3 and done. It's like, oh man, like what a waste of like, because even like to see like Andre in more of his prime, like Andre versus Brock, like wow, that would be something. Never mind Hogan and Andre. There's your immovable force or was it unstoppable force, immovable object. Like damn.
To this day, what I don't understand is why they haven't had like Brock versus Lashley, 2 MMA guys. I would think that would be like a WrestleMania main event. Vince doesn't see it for some reason.
That's what everyone was waiting for.
Yeah.
Was Lesnar and Lashley.
Well, I think if we're going to use the Wayback Machine, we would better be able to set Brock just before a little bit earlier, and he could have become Chief Brock Lesnar. He could have been the token Indian that they were always looking for. Like,
he would have been the Minnesota Mauler.
The Minnesota Mauler. Or they could have given him an Asian gimmick. I don't know. Anyways.
This is why Elio and I are here to kind of like pull him back in from all the silliness.
Yeah. Once I go off the rails, they need to throw me back on. Elio, give me a wrestler, buddy.
Okay, one guy I've always liked. Another, again, we're going back to AEW, Adam Page.
Adam Page. Interesting. What are you liking about Adam Page?
I like his whole gimmick. Although in the first year of AEW, I really didn't like the whole the
falling down drunk.
The drunk cowboy down on his luck. Like they just made this watered down his character and made him look ridiculous with all the comedy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Andy.
Adam Page. Checking something here. Do we I just wanted because I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh.
So he's not overly tall, hey?
Who? Adam Page?
He's 6 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. That's at least that's what the build height is.
Yeah, probably means take away 2 inches.
Yeah, I don't. And you guys know, like I don't mind him in AEW. I don't see him being anything special really to that, like, in that time. If I try to go the wider scope, maybe around the territories, he'd be good. If you're doing Cowboy Adam Page, but WWF, NWA, I don't see anything, mid card at best.
Okay, fair enough. Evan, how do you see Adam Page now, and what do you think of time way backing him in the old time machine?
Adam Page is one of these guys who are very, very good and not quite great.
Mm-hmm.
I would see him mid to high on the card, if not the main event. And I see him as a guy like Dutch Mantell and so many others. He would have made a decent living working the territories, even headlining in some of the territories, but this is not the guy that would have headlined in WWF.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I agree with you guys in a sense of, okay, first let me say, I think Adam Page is tremendous. Okay. I think he's a very good wrestler. Sometimes I think he does lack a little spark of charisma that you kind of need for that upper echelon, but we've seen it. We've seen him do it in ROH. We have not seen him do it in AEW as much as he should be able to do, which is troublesome. Okay. I think he could be could he be a champion? Last year, I would have said yes for AEW, but now that they've got guys like Bryan Danielson and CM Punk and all these other big names, I think that really kind of pushes him out of the picture. I don't think he has charisma enough to run with those guys yet. I think he's tremendous. The 70s, though, you guys make a good point. Go back to the 70s, 80s. If you were a cowboy gimmick, you had better be a big, strong dude. And as well as he is a solid big guy, he's not by any means as big as the dudes who were cowboys back then. So I think poor Adam Page would have to probably find a different gimmick.
It's like, to me, it's like, okay, let's put like Stan Hansen up against Adam Page.
Yeah, no, poor Adam Page is a dead man. That's not a good idea. Not a good idea. And I'm not belittling Adam Page whatsoever. Okay. But it's just like the cowboy gimmick back in the 70s and 80s. There were no small cowboy dudes. They were all 260 to 350 pound dudes or the cowboys.
Mantell wasn't huge, but he was.
No, but I mean, look at some of the big ones they had. Cowboy. Oh, they all had cowboy in the front, but you know what I mean. The Blackjacks, Bob, Dunkum, you know, all these dudes were big, you know. And by the way, the drunken cowboy gimmick, wasn't that Terry Funk doing that for years? Anyways, moving on. Boy, okay, let's think. A wrestler that I really like now. Who do I really like to turn on? You know, I'm going to put on a wrestler I don't like. And I know these guys will probably tell you why they don't like him. I'm curious what you think of it, Evan. And let's be honest, if this gimmick would make it in the 70s or 80s, and I'm talking about Orange Cassidy. The guy with this, I don't even get it. He's a slacker is his thing. He's the guy who shows you that you don't have to do anything to get ahead. He's so cool that he doesn't have to take his hands out of his pockets when he wrestles.
Is that what his character is? Because I still haven't figured it out.
I think it's definitely not to our age demographics, his whole thing. But it seems like he has a lot of fans. It seems like a lot of people like him. When I do watch him, when he starts wrestling, the dude can wrestle. He's got like some 15 plus years experience on the indies. He does know how to wrestle. How he can jump through a rope with his hands in his pocket is terrifying and spectacular all at the same time. But I'm curious because I do not see any way in hell a gimmick like that could work in the 70s and 80s. I think it's just a change in values. I think people who were slackers like that weren't even glorified whatsoever. Nobody liked people like that. When you made fun of somebody was a geek, geek wasn't a name you took and proudly said, yeah, I'm a geek. No, geek was something you were ashamed of, you know? First of all, I want to ask Elio, what do you think right now of this guy, Orange Cassidy?
Okay, Orange Cassidy, I'm not the biggest fan. When he debuted, I just didn't get the whole character.
Mm-hmm.
How he flies through the ropes with his hands in his pocket, I don't get. It's like both terrifying, spectacular, dangerous.
And yet kind of watch it. It's like a car wreck, right? You got to watch it when it happens.
It's like you have to watch it. You can't turn away. Some of the moves, because he can wrestle. But the other thing that annoys me about him is the shin kicks that he does.
Yes. And you know what, Evan, this harking back to what you would classify as the ridiculousness of the juvenile thinking of like the WWE creative, this whole let's slow down and do stuff in a slow motion pantomime of wrestling.
I watch Orange Cassidy like it's performance art. I don't even connect it with pro wrestling. I'm just no, really. It's like the rules all change when this guy comes out, and it's shtick. It's basically if you went to an off-Broadway theater and somebody was doing performance art, and in and of itself, I think the guy's talented and it's original, but they would have beat him up in the WWF locker room. In the locker room, they wouldn't have accepted it back then. And he could have made it in a place like LA where they were more open to crazy gimmicks. They had the Frankenstein monster and the mummy, and really silly gimmicks, because they just would do anything to get fans in the door. So maybe even in Memphis, where they were more open to like crazy gimmicks, but he would not have made it doing that in WWF. McMahon's father was too serious for that. He wouldn't have accepted it.
True. So he could have been like, he probably would have beaten Lawler at least once or twice for that belt. Maybe. Before Lawler got to his 600th reign.
He would have headlined the Olympic against Piper in '75, and they would have had a lot of fun. Really. I have no problem with it, believe it or not, because to me it's not wrestling, so you just take it for what it is. It's comedy, and I appreciate his skills,
And it doesn't offend you that shows up on the middle of a wrestling program?
It's all suspension of disbelief. If you have a lucha match and the 7 guys are waiting outside the ring to catch the guy, you have to suspend disbelief.
That's every match these days.
Yeah.
I mean, even like the Superman comebacks, whether it was Hogan or The Undertaker or even Bruno, it wasn't exactly the most realistic. All of a sudden the guy, would come out of nowhere, and in real life, the 300-pound guy pounding you for 20 minutes, the guy would be lying there dead. So it's just with Orange Cassidy, it's 10 times or 100 times the suspension of disbelief, and it doesn't offend me, really, honestly.
Okay.
What offends me is a guy like Finn Balor, who's so great doing absolute crap like yesterday. That bothers me.
Okay. Reference. So the fans who just tuning in now, who have no idea what you're talking about, just walk us through what you did not like and what you saw there. We're talking Finn Balor versus Roman Reigns. Extreme Rules, I believe, was the pay-per-view.
Finn Balor is a technician who can wrestle as well as virtually anyone, and basically they were just hitting each other like any garbage wrestling match with every object in sight. And then at the very end, they did like special effects where the ring ropes collapsed, and it was just a stupid ending. It was like a cartoon. That offended me. Orange Cassidy, it is what it is. It's just silly for the sake of being silly. Roll with it for 8 minutes. Bring on Omega and the Lucha Brothers and the big boys afterwards.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Andy, I know you are. Let's just say you've been juiced with the orange.
Yeah, no, I even as Evan's talking, I'm trying to I understand what he's saying. I'm trying to buy into it. But for me, I don't know if it's just a combination of not my thing and just my old school mentality, but I just, it's funny, and I can almost be hypocritical saying that because, you talk about the lucha matches and the comebacks and stuff. And I often talk about, as soon as we start doing multi-man, anything beyond a tag, you start doing the 6, 8, 10-man tags. And all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I just enjoy it for what it is, because all the rules are going to go out the window and whatever. Mm-hmm. I think how I would look at that based on what Evan was saying is, to me, it's, it's probably like watching a movie or a TV show. It's like you can take your suspension of disbelief to a certain level, and then it gets to a point where it's like, nope, I'm done. I've suspended my disbelief for this. I've suspended it for the big Hogan comeback. I've suspended it for the Undertaker rising from the dead. I've suspended that all of a sudden rules go out the window and 6, 8 men with their shotguns finish. I can't get past, it's like if he's going to kick somebody in the shins and he's doing the thing in the pockets, it's like Evan initially said, he'd get his ass kicked in the locker room. Never mind making it out to to the middle of the ring, and that's I even for Memphis. And I mean, at first as you say, I'm like, oh yeah, because Memphis, and I love Memphis, and for all the stuff that they do, I even have a hard time seeing that. Like, you're just like, oh yeah, maybe he'll beat Lawler for the belt once or twice. I'm like, no, I can't even buy into that.
Russell Kaufman.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're comparing Andy Kaufman to, here we go.
It's comparing
Kaufman to Cassidy. That's comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's performance art. It's not wrestling.
But I don't see like the performance art the way at least Kaufman was doing it, where it was still more
wrestling.
Yeah, more. I hesitate to say legit, but I mean it was more towards wrestling. It was still the talking trash, and he's still trying to grab the. I mean, and let's face it, like Kaufman actually did very little, right? Because it was mostly just the talk and the jaw jacking when he had the matches with Lawler, and then it was like one bump, and it's like he broke his neck. To me, that's more believable than anything Orange Cassidy's going to do. So that's why I say it's like it's. My suspension of disbelief. It's like, no, I'm sorry, it's not going to hit that point. So I'm not a fan of it now. And yeah, like
fair enough. You know what I find comical is when you have the 3-man matches, and the one guy within a minute he's lying outside the ring taking a nap. Then when that guy falls out of the ring, he immediately rejuvenates and jumps back in.
That's strategy. That's strategy because he's waiting for a spot to get back in.
It's funny because the way you both have talked has really helped me to express what I've always struggled to express about why I get slightly annoyed by the Orange Cassidy stuff and stuff like this. Okay. I appreciate the guy's skill and I appreciate the performance art aspect of it. Okay. But when I be able to break it down for me easy is the sense of, I go to a lot of indie shows, right? And I see lots of nonsense on indie shows, like lots of nonsense. You see the guys being hypnotized by the dance move. You see, people slowing down and doing the slow motion bits. I saw one time where a guy got knocked out at the end of his match, and it was for the intermission was coming next. So just for the fun of it, he laid in the entire ring for the entire intermission as if he was knocked out and nobody helped him. So he laid there for like 25 minutes, not moving, just so he could top his buddy who did 35 minutes the day before. So I get that stuff and I have a chuckle with that stuff. However, I don't think I want to turn on my television and see that stuff. I think things come in levels. And it's okay to see some low-level, low-brow humor here. And it's okay to see something on a bigger stage there. But on the television and a giant stage, I don't think it's appropriate. It's like watching, going to your local college, watching 2 kids put on a fight scene or something like that, then going to an off Broadway show and seeing some ridiculousness, and then turning on your television. I don't want to see that pile of shit on television. I think by the time you hit the television, you should be much more polished and a better thing. I think it just makes it seem like then any piece of crap can make it on television. And that's supposed to be your upper goal. So I guess that's why that bothers me is that some of that stuff I believe should be left down on the lower levels. It's all right. I'm not going to make fun of Orange Cassidy if I pay my money and go see him do that shtick in front of 200 fans in Edmonton on a Friday night. Sure, why not? I do not think it's cool to turn on my television with a couple million of us watching and trying to explain what the hell is that crap going on to people who just turned it on by accident.
Let me put it to you this way. I would, as a jaded old school fan, I would travel to see Omega against Bryan Danielson. I wouldn't travel to see Orange Cassidy on top. To me, it's just a chuckle in the middle of a show. I'm not that far removed from how you guys see it, but it doesn't bother me as well.
Yeah. He's one of the acts, and he's one of the acts of the circus, but he's not in the main tent that we're coming to see the big main stars.
No. It's like when you see war. Evan has saw so much horrible things in his life that now he's willing to just accept that some things happen. Oh man. Well, you know what? This has been fun just talking about some modern wrestling, getting some takes on stuff. It's always fun too, because we've always had we've had our things about the 80s and the 70s, and we've seen things, and we may not have Evan's only just a little bit older than us, and it's not like me and Andy are spring chickens. Our heydays were the mid 80s. Evan's maybe the late 70s. Elio's is, I don't know, what is it, 2010s? Anyhow.
2010. So think of a little further back, like the 80s.
But it's just kind of interesting to see, like, it's so cool to see how some of the guys on top, to be honest, if we're going to be 100% honest with ourselves, most of the guys that are on top these days would not have been on top 40 years ago, because the world was different. We saw things through different colored eyes. We saw things through different perspectives and different values. And it's just like saying whatever thing is super cool trend right now, it wouldn't work 40 years ago because it wasn't a trend then. It wasn't on the radar. It was a whole weird and alien thing. It's fun of us to pretend, oh, how would that guy do and blah, blah, blah. But in most factualities, there's not a lot of people who can transcend the things. I mean, even Hulk Hogan got booed in WCW days. He went from the immortal Hulk Hogan to the who's that old dude with the scraggly mustache. Like, life happens, things change, and fans' perspectives change. It is fun for us to do our armchair booking and pretend that we can move guys around, because it's a fun thing to do. We're hoping you fans tuned in and listened and got some fun perspectives. Maybe we talked about some of the stars you like. Maybe we didn't. If we didn't, why don't you write in and tell us the people you'd like us to talk about? I know Evan's going to be coming back on the show down the road. We're going to have him talk a lot more 70s and 80s wrestlers. If there are some wrestlers that you really wanted some insight about that specifically wrestled in the Northeast United States, by all means, drop us some notes, ask, and we'll see if we can question Evan about some of the people that you maybe, it doesn't always have to be the superstars. I joked about that. What was that guy's name? Say it again. Baron
Cicluna.
Baron Cicluna. I've heard that name. I've seen that name.
Yes.
A gazillion things. All I know is I saw a picture of a dude, a ill-fitting cape and a dude, and I know nothing about him. That's the kind of guy that, why not ask Evan what his memories of that? Because I bet you he has some, because that guy wrestled a lot in that area.
Baron Cicluna every month for 10 years. I can tell you a lot about him. Yeah.
So fans, feel free to write in. And fans, we are thinking of starting a GoFundMe so that Elio can get one more light bulb in that damn room. So, he is not Teen Wolf. We're not sure what he's doing over there. Is he wearing clothes? We don't know. Maybe that's the whole thing.
Rescue team to get him out of the casket.
And we may even start a GoFundMe and get poor Andy a razor. I don't know.
No.
He's shaving his head, not his beard. It's the wrong hair, Andy. It's the wrong hair. And by the way, fans, if you want to see Andy stick a bunch of wicks on his beard and light his face up like Yellowbeard, if we get 100,000 likes or requests, Andy will indeed shove some candles in his face, light them up like the Yellowbeard movie. I don't know how much he'll scream when those wicks hit his hair. We don't know. We'll find out. Won't it be great?
100,000, that's a stretch. 100,000.
I don't know what's going on here. Elio, I don't know what's going on here. What's going on?
Oh, Evan, please forgive the children. Thank you for coming on this week's episode. I hope you had fun. It's always great to hear what's it like to be the voice of reason amongst the three of us? That's crazy, man.
I enjoy doing your show because you guys are knowledgeable and you don't treat it like it's life and death. I mean, I have guys attack me online like I'm their mortal enemy because they disagree with something you say about a WWE pay-per-view or whatnot. It's like some of these people really cross a line into obsessive.
Yeah.
So,
Well, first of all,
and you know what? Actually, if I could say real quick, when we were talking at the start of the show, kind of talking about how with Evan and how what he posts, it's not just about wrestling, because even he talks a lot about movies and he talks a lot about music, and that's one of the things too. And it's that same kind of mindset that goes across the wrestling, the movies, the music. It's like, you talk about people from 30, 40, 50 years ago that, this was the best back then, nothing is as good now. And you made the point of saying, it's like, okay, well, yeah, no, like I still believe this was pretty special, but they still can acknowledge and recognize there's still great stuff that's going on to this day.
Yeah, I tell people support indie everything, indie film, indie music, indie theater, whatever. Because I'll tell you, I have tons of musician friends. They're brilliant. To say there's been no good music since the Beatles is just stupid. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little harder to find, but it's out there. Believe me. And we make indie films, and we spent 6 years making 350 Days. People don't realize what goes into making we spent 7 years making The Wrestler. So The Wrestler technically is an indie film. It was done on $6 million. That wouldn't be the food budget for the Avengers. No, seriously. And so you could create art on a budget, and the dinosaurs that go, there's been no good wrestling since the territories. Come on. It's absurd. And so my mantra is really support quality and support indie. And and the artists appreciate it, because every dollar counts and your support counts. And when you go to a club and you see an indie artist, this guy might recognize you by face. Paul McCartney's looking at it 80,000 people. It's a different experience,
Yeah.
So, and I tell people all the time. I told a story. I'll make this real quick. I know you want to go. I was telling a story the other day how I was working a gimmick table. Who's seated next to me? Chris Canyon. And nicest guy going, and we're just bullshitting during the lulls in the day or night or whatever. And my buddy shows up with his nephew and his little friends. They're like grade schoolers, and Chris Canyon suddenly gets up. He says, "Guys, don't go anywhere." And he runs to his car, and he brings back these beautiful 8x10s, and he signs it. "What's your name, kid?" And he signs it for everybody. So my friend goes, "How much do I owe you?" And Chris Canyon goes, Nothing. I wouldn't charge a kid, And it's like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, this is like an indie artist mentality. He wanted to make these kids happy. It wasn't about money. Vince, everything's about money. It's a different mindset, and so when we work on various projects, we want something to be great, not a product. We want to do something, that'll stand the test of time. And and you guys do a really good show. It's from the heart. If you guys sat here and obsessively went over like every match on Raw and SmackDown, I wouldn't be here, because I'd fall asleep. Really.
We used to fall asleep doing that for AEW.
That's why I don't watch Raw. I have it recorded, and then I fast forward through the commercials.
Skim through everything.
Parts.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my monologue for the evening. But
that was good. I remember reading that Chris Canyon story. That was very cool.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I just want to just say something really quick too. Is you reminded me of a really quick story. Is I've been to so many events, and I've worked, kind of backstage at things, and I've been like, helping guys at the tables or whatever, right? And I've seen many stars come in, named guys, and interact with fans, and I've seen extremes where I've seen like Raven come in and just not even really look at you, scribble something and ask for money, I've seen that. But then on the flip side, and I want to bring this up, is one of the most touching things I saw of a wrestler interacting with fans was years ago at a show in Edmonton where Daphne was on. And every time, every single little girl that came up to her, she went around the table and talked with, and I was so impressed watching her, but she's barely, she's not really doing this for money, because you're not really doing, especially in Edmonton, you're not going to be doing a shit ton of money unless you're like AJ Styles or something like that. But you're not really going to make a ton of money doing this. And she's there, and she's she's taking her time. She doesn't care that she's not pumping, money in her fist every 2 seconds. She's talking to each person like they're friends or somebody she wants to get to know. And I was so impressed with the way she treated not just me and fans, but little girls and children. And to this day, it extremely hit me the day I read that she had died, because she stuck in my head as one of the kindest wrestlers I had ever dealt with the entire time I had been in wrestling. So it's so sad and tragic when people that are that giving and caring just get eaten up in this world.
Well, sometimes when people are very sensitive, it's, they feel everything 10 times more. They say the poets and the saints are the only ones who truly see. It's an old expression, but, so she was probably very special, and everything hit her, much harder as a sensitive person. And ironically, Chris Kanyon killed himself on my wedding day. On my wedding day. I mean, what are the chances of that? So I always think of him, and it just saddens me. And that Dark Side of the Ring, really, brought everything back, which is why I wrote that. But
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Evan. It's not a cool story for you to have to think about. But we want to thank you again for coming on this week. This was fun. Tell everybody where they can find stuff. I know you could turn on Prime, because I just watched last month. I would just watch 350 Days. I watched that on Prime Network. The Wrestler, it's floating around out there. Tell me some other stuff that people can look for and what you're doing.
Sure. I have a book coming out, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets, 100 stories similar to the one I just told you. Lost a lot of good people along the way, and it's not just wrestling, like Andy said. It's basically my life in 100 stories, as an educator, as a filmmaker, as a person involved in wrestling in various capacities, and being on the road with guys like the Valiants and Captain Lou and these guys, and really funny stuff, really sad stuff, really poignant. Just a lot of experiences that have been floating around my head, and because of the pandemic, I had the time to actually put them to paper, and so that should be out hopefully by the end of the year, beginning of next year. It's written, it's in production already. And we have a film, Wrestling Then and Now, that we did some 20 years back on pennies. You could see that on Amazon. Killer Kowalski, Don Dr. Death Arnold, Homicide. How's that for past meets present? Homicide's in the same movie as Killer Kowalski.
Wow. That's crazy.
Homicide's awesome. He's great. And et cetera, so on. I'm not hard to find. I do a Facebook page, Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories. You could check that out, and et cetera, so on. I'm easy enough.
Excellent.
But I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Anytime.
Oh, we appreciate you.
Yes, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, fans, we want to thank you for tuning in this week. It's been a fun time. You've been listening to the Real Quarantine Show. I'm not the Lone Wolf Andy Anderson, nor am I the gentleman Elio Canella. That's those two guys over there. But we all want to wish you good night, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Check out Evan, and I'm going to tell you one last quick thing. One time I wanted to talk with Cody Rhodes, and I said, how do I get to talk to Cody Rhodes? And they said, oh, you're going to have to talk. This was at a wrestling show, by the way. Keep this in mind, at a wrestling show. They said, you're going to have to talk to his agent. And then maybe his agent will talk to him, and then maybe he'll get back to his agent, and his agent will maybe set something up with you. Like, I just sort of went, fuck it, walked away. When I talked to Evan, I sent him an email saying, hey, we're doing the show. Would you like to be on it? He went, yeah, sure. Why not? It's that easy. Thanks, Evan. Guys, have a great night. Hey, Andy, do us out with the.
All right, I was going to say, this may be new, but there's some things that remain the same. So we go. All right. Fans, thanks for tuning in. In the meantime, and in between time, that's it. Another edition of The Real Quarantine. Bye-bye now.
Bye.